I work the closing shift at a small cafe in the city, usually from 8 p.m. to midnight. It's not glamorous, but I've always liked the quiet rhythm of it, the sound of the espresso machine hissing, the low hum of background music, and the calm of cleaning up after the last few customers. I don't mind the solitude. It's almost comforting at the end of a long day. The cafe is tucked away on a quiet street in the middle of the city, where everything slows down once the office buildings close and the rush of commuters fades. My apartment is just a few blocks away. Nothing fancy, but it's affordable. It's a short walk home, and that's always been one of the perks of living in the city. Even after a long shift, I don't mind the walk. It's only a 10-minute stroll down familiar streets. I've done it countless times without a second thought. But this time was different. That Thursday evening was like any other. I stayed a bit later than usual to help my coworker clean up after a rush of late-night customers. By the time I stepped outside, the streets were quiet, and the air had that crisp bite to it, typical of early autumn. The streetlights flickered as they illuminated the empty sidewalks. I tucked my phone into my pocket, listening to the sound of my boots tapping against the pavement, and started heading home. I didn't immediately notice him, the man in the long coat walking a few feet behind me. I didn't give it much thought at first. It was late, and I was tired. I assumed he was just another late-night walker, maybe someone heading home from work or a late-night errand. The city can feel deserted at night, but every now and then you'll pass another person walking the same lonely streets. I turned down the alley behind the cafe, a shortcut I've taken 100 times. It's well lit, with street lamps hanging overhead, casting long shadows across the pavement. But that night, something was different. I felt it. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I glanced back, catching sight of him. He was still behind me, walking at a steady pace, his face hidden beneath the collar of his coat. His steps were slow but deliberate, not rushed, just there, watching. I quickened my pace, telling myself it was nothing. Maybe he lived nearby. Maybe we were both just headed in the same direction. But as I sped up, I heard his footsteps match mine. The sound of his shoes hitting the pavement was now in sync with mine, almost as if he were deliberately keeping pace with me. I glanced back again, this time more sharply. The man hadn't changed his stride. He was still walking a few feet behind me, but now I could see his posture more clearly. He wasn't just walking, he was following. His eyes seemed to be trained on me, and his head was slightly lowered, like he was trying not to be noticed, but he wasn't even pretending to go in a different direction. My heart rate picked up. I told myself I was overthinking it. Maybe I was just being paranoid. It was late, and the dark street did things to your mind, made shadows seem deeper, sounds feel louder, but the feeling of being watched, of being stalked, was undeniable. I decided to take a detour through the park, hoping to lose him in the winding paths. The park was quiet at this hour, the only sound the rustling of leaves in the trees and the distant hum of traffic from the main road. I walked briskly, my heart thudding in my chest. I kept glancing over my shoulder, but I didn't see him for a moment. Maybe I'd lost him, I thought. Maybe he had just been a figment of my imagination. But then, as I reached the park's edge, I saw him again. He was standing at the far end of the path, just on the outskirts of the light from the street lamps. He wasn't moving, just standing there staring at me. The same steady, unblinking gaze, the same unnerving, deliberate stillness. I froze. For a few moments I couldn't move. I thought about what to do. Should I run? Should I call someone? But my phone was buried deep in my bag, and there was no one around to help me. I knew I couldn't just walk past him. I couldn't risk it. Without thinking, I turned sharply and darted into a convenience store across the street. The bell above the door jingled as I entered, and I forced myself to look calm as I approached the counter, pretending to browse the shelves. My mind raced. Was he following me inside? Was he watching me through the window? I kept my eyes trained on the door, my chest tight, waiting for a sign that he was still out there. It felt like an eternity before I dared to peek through the window. For a split second, I thought I saw his shadow pass by, but when I looked again, he was gone. I exhaled, relieved but still uneasy. I quickly paid for a bottle of water and left the store, hoping to make it home without incident. But as I stepped back onto the sidewalk, I saw him again. This time he was standing across the street, illuminated by the faint glow of a streetlight. Just standing there, staring at me. I felt the blood drain from my face. I didn't hesitate. I turned and ran. I ran like my life depended on it, my breath coming in short, panicked bursts as I sprinted the remaining blocks to my apartment. I didn't stop to look back until I was safely inside my building. I locked the door behind me, double-checking the deadbolt, and then collapsed against the wall. The next morning, as I was leaving to grab some coffee, I ran into my neighbor, Ben, who lives 2 doors down. He works at the local hardware store and usually keeps to himself, but that morning he seemed off. He greeted me with a strained smile, his eyes darting down the hallway before quickly looking away. When I asked him if everything was okay, he just muttered something about being tired and quickly went back inside his apartment. Something about his behavior lingered with me. I couldn't shake the feeling that he knew something I didn't. That night, I couldn't help but wonder, had I been the only one to notice the man following me? Or had Ben, or someone else in the building, seen him too? My apartment feels quieter now, the silence heavier. Even though the man never showed up again, I can't stop looking over my shoulder when I walk down the street at night. Maybe it's just the city playing tricks on me, but it's hard to forget the feeling of being watched, of someone deliberately waiting for the right moment. And every now and then, I'll glance at the shadows on my walk home, just in case he's still out there. I've always considered myself a relatively cautious person, especially when it comes to living alone in a city. I've read enough stories to know that being aware of your surroundings is crucial, so I tend to be vigilant, locking doors, checking windows, always keeping my phone on me in case of emergencies. It had been a long day, and by the time I got home from work, I was exhausted. My apartment is small but cozy, nestled in an old building in a quiet part of the city. Nothing extraordinary about it, just another 1-bedroom unit with worn-out carpet and creaky floors. I was looking forward to a peaceful evening, maybe watching some TV and reading before bed. I had just settled onto the couch when I heard a faint knock at my door. It was around 10 p.m., and I wasn't expecting anyone, which immediately made me wary. I glanced through the peephole but saw no one. The hallway was dark. I hesitated for a moment. Maybe it was a neighbor who had dropped something by mistake, or maybe someone delivering a package. Still, I didn't feel comfortable just opening the door without knowing who it was, so I called out, "Hello," in case it was someone I knew. There was a long pause. No response. Then, I heard the knock again, this time louder. It made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Whoever it was wasn't leaving. I decided to call the building manager, just in case, but the line rang and rang with no answer. I checked the time, just after 10:30. Who would come by at this hour? A sense of unease settled over me. I wasn't sure if I should call the police, but something told me it might not be necessary yet. Maybe I was just being paranoid. I stepped back from the door and waited a few minutes, debating what to do. The silence seemed to stretch on longer than it should have. Then the knock came again, this time accompanied by a soft voice. It wasn't loud enough to make out clearly, but I could hear words in the distance, like someone was mumbling just outside. I pressed my ear against the door, straining to catch the words. It didn't make sense, but I swear I heard something like, "Let me in. I need help." Now I was genuinely alarmed. No one had ever come to my door asking for help at this hour. I felt a chill run through me. This was no normal visit. I crept back to the peephole and peered through it again, but I still saw nothing, just the faint, shadowy outline of the hallway. My pulse was racing. I wanted to call the police, but I didn't want to overreact if it was a harmless misunderstanding. But then I thought, what if it wasn't? The knocking stopped for a while, and I stood frozen by the door, listening. It felt like I could hear every creak of the old building around me. After what felt like an eternity, I heard footsteps retreating down the hallway, slow and deliberate. It seemed like they were leaving. I exhaled, the tension easing slightly. But then, just as I was about to walk away from the door, I heard one more knock. This time, though, it was different. It wasn't coming from the front door. It was coming from the window. I froze again, my heart dropping into my stomach. There was no way anyone could have gotten to the window without me hearing them. It was on the second floor, and my apartment was on a corner. There was no reason for anyone to be standing out there unless they had some sinister motive. I stumbled over to the window, cautiously pulling back the curtain to peer outside. The street below was empty, lit only by the weak glow of the streetlights. No one was there. But then, just as I was about to let go of the curtain, I saw something. A figure, standing just beneath the window, hidden by the dark shadows of the trees. I couldn't make out details, but it was definitely a person, and they were looking straight up at me. My blood ran cold. I don't know how long they had been there, but the way they just stood there, motionless, waiting, was enough to send me into a panic. I backed away from the window quickly, locking it as I moved. At this point, I didn't know what to do. I was terrified, my mind racing with thoughts of what could be happening. Was this a random, unsettling encounter? Or had someone been watching me for longer than I realized? My body felt paralyzed by fear, but I knew I had to do something. I called the police, explaining what had happened. They took my information and promised to send an officer, but they said it would take a while. The knock at the window hadn't been a mistake, and I wasn't going to sit there helplessly waiting for someone to try something else. When the officer arrived about 45 minutes later, he checked the area around the building but found nothing. No sign of anyone lurking outside. It was as if the person had vanished into thin air. He told me to report anything strange immediately, but assured me that I was probably just dealing with an isolated incident. But I wasn't convinced. For the next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still watching me. The knocking stopped, but I started noticing little things, footsteps outside my door, an occasional shadow in the corner of my eye when I was near the window. The feeling of being followed, watched, never left. A week later, the building manager called me. They'd been reviewing security footage from the hallways, and while they couldn't find anything specific about the knocks, they did notice something strange. In the footage from the night I'd heard the knocks, there was someone, a figure wearing a dark hoodie, standing just outside my door at the exact time I heard the knocking. But when they checked the footage again, the person was gone. It was like they had disappeared. I moved out shortly after that. The building still gives me a weird vibe whenever I think about it. I don't know who that person was or what they wanted, but I can't shake the feeling that someone was just waiting for the right moment to get inside. Even now, whenever I hear a knock at my door late at night, my heart skips a beat. It was around 11:30 p.m. when I finished my shift at the convenience store. I was tired, hungry, and eager to get home, so I quickly grabbed my things and headed out to the parking lot. The store was in a small strip mall, not exactly a high-traffic area, but it was usually pretty safe. The lot had a few cars scattered around, most of them older models with a couple of parked delivery vans. I walked toward my car, a beat-up sedan, and noticed a woman standing near the far end of the lot. She looked like she was in her mid-30s, dressed in a coat that was too thin for the chilly weather, and her hair was unkempt like she had just gotten out of bed. At first, I thought she was just waiting for someone, or maybe lost. I didn't think much of it. People do weird things in parking lots all the time, especially late at night. As I got closer to my car, I noticed she was staring right at me. Not in a curious or friendly way, but with a kind of intensity that made me feel uncomfortable. I hesitated for a moment, thinking I might offer to help if she needed it, but something told me I should just mind my business and keep walking. I got to my car, unlocked it, and started to get inside when I heard her call out,
"Hey, can you help me?"
I froze, halfway in the car. I looked up, and she was still standing there, staring at me, her face a little too calm for the situation. She repeated,
"Can you help me? I really need help."
Now, I'm not someone who's easily scared, but something about her tone and the way she was looking at me set off alarms in my head. I looked around to see if there was anyone else nearby, no one in sight. I debated for a second, but the last thing I wanted was to get involved in some weird situation, so I decided to just ignore her and drive off. I got in, locked the door, and started the engine. But before I could pull out of the parking spot, I glanced up again. The woman had moved closer. She was now standing right behind my car, staring directly at me through the windshield. I felt my heart skip a beat. There was no way she had moved that fast. My parking spot wasn't exactly close to the store, and I hadn't seen her walk up to my car at all. It was as if she had just appeared there out of nowhere. I backed up quickly, hitting the gas, and watched in the rearview mirror as she stood there, still staring. I didn't know what to make of it, but I wasn't about to hang around to find out. I drove straight home, my mind racing, trying to rationalize what had just happened. The next day, I mentioned the encounter to my coworker, asking if she'd seen anything strange in the parking lot. She paused for a second, then said, "Funny you mention that. I saw a woman hanging around here last week, acting really weird too. I thought maybe she was just lost, but she definitely gave me a weird vibe." I don't know if it was just coincidence or if the woman was just in some kind of distress, but I've never been able to shake the feeling that something wasn't right about that night. I still drive through that parking lot every day on my way home, and I always glance around just to make sure no one is standing too close to my car, waiting.